Sicily is the largest island in the Mediterranean, occupying a very strategic geographical position located right in the middle between Spain and Greece. To the north of is Italy, along with the island of Sardinia and Corsica. To the south are Malta and the African coast, with Tunisia being the closest country whose capital was Carthage. The first inhabitants of Sicily were the Sicani in the 3rd millennium before Christ, who are said to have originated from Catalonia or northern Spain. The Sicani lived in the eastern part of Sicily, and later in the 1st millennium before Christ, the Sicels were the original inhabitants before the arrival of the Phoenicians. The first to arrive in Sicily were the Phoenicians, who established their colony in Palermo, which they called Cis, meaning flower, later becoming known as Panormus. Other colonizers included the Dorian and Ionian Greeks, the Rhodians from Rhodes, the Cretans, the Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, and Normans, leading to the Middle Ages with Aragonese and Spanish rule, which lasted for 400 years. Garibaldi unified with the Italian mainland, and it was declared an autonomous region of Italy in the 19th century. The first settlers who came from Greece founded Nachos on the eastern coast of Sicily. Later, the Dorians arrived from the island of Rhodes and Crete, founding Hela, and subsequently Akragas, which is present-day Agrigento. Later, still the Corinthians founded Syracuse, and finally the Chalcidians from the island of Eubea founded Catania. The Elymians, who came from Troy, founded Segesta, a magnificent temple they built that has survived to these days. After the Greeks, the Romans invaded the island in the 3rd century, and they soon had it practically under their control, with the exception of Syracuse. Under Emperor Augustus, the Roman promoted large-scale land ownership, and agriculture was very important as Sicily became the granary of Rome. After the Romans expelled the Carthaginians from Sicily and won the First and Second Punic Wars, the colossal Roman Empire encompassed the entire Mediterranean from east to west. Following the fall of Rome to the Germanic tribes, Goths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths, who sacked Rome under Genseric, the Byzantine Empire was established in Constantinople until 1453. The Byzantines, under their general Belisarius, extended their dominion and reached Sicily. Subsequent internal conflicts led to a weakening of the empire, which facilitated the Muslim invasion through Mathara. Euphemius summoned them for aid in 827, and they remained on the island until 1060, when the Normans arrived. The Normans, descendants of the Scandinavian Vikings who had settled in Normandy, men of the north, as their name suggests, conquered England, and they ventured into the Mediterranean, reaching Sicily in 1060 through the Strait of Messina. Their lineage led the robber Hotevil and his son Roger I and Roger II established a dynasty that ruled until the arrival of the Angevins and the crown of Aragon. Upon the death of Frederick II, the Pope appointed Charles of Anjou as his successor. However, another Norman lineage, represented by Manfred, whose daughter Constance was married to Peter III, King of Aragon, was the driving force behind what happened during the Sicilian Vespers. The Sicilian people did not want Charles of Anjou as their king, and therefore supported Peter III and Constance as the rightful successors. The war between Charles of Anjou and Peter III reached Catalonia when Philip III, the French king, invaded the crown of Aragon, forcing Peter III to return to Spain. However, the power of the crown of Aragon after defeating Charles of Anjou extended throughout the Mediterranean, gaining control of all Mediterranean trade, which is capital in Barcelona, and later becoming the Spanish Empire when Aragon united with Castile. On my trip to Sicily, I experienced, as Lampedusa said, the understanding that Sicilians have incorporated the cultures of their colonizers into their own, adapting to their costumes while minimizing their own idiosyncrasies, which developed under the influence of the numerous people who invaded the island. Alexander Dumas, Goethe, and others began their journey in Palermo, arriving from Naples and visiting Segesta, with its most emblematic and best preserved temple. Then Agrigento, the Agracas of the Greeks, who built numerous temples in the Valley of the Temples. My journey continued along the southern coast of Sicily to Gela and Rhodian and Cretan colony. Before arriving in Noto, a distinguished town which is Baroque buildings from Agrigento, I traveled to Syracuse, a majestic city which is annexed island of Ortygia. And from there I went on to my visit Catania, right next to Mount Etna. From Catania I returned to Palermo, passing through Etna, a town located in the center of the island, and in Palermo my journey ended. Of the four main cities I visited, Palermo, Agrigento, Syracuse, and Catania, I have an unforgettable memory. What surprised me most was seeing the temples that the Greeks built there. The Corinthians, Ionians, and Rhodians called the island Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, because the scale of the temples built there was colossal compared to those in Greece itself. A visit to the cathedral offers several options, including tours of the rooftops, the interior, and the tombs where Norman kings and Queen Constance, wife of Peter III of the Crown of Aragon, are buried. The view from the cathedral rooftops is spectacular, offering panoramic views of the city of Palermo. The towers and the cathedral dome can also be seen up close. Here I am on top of the cathedral, contemplating the dome of the Church of Jesus and its tower in the distance, next to my friend Ramon, with whom I made the trip. The cathedral's construction was begun by the Normans in 1185 although it was built on the site of earlier Byzantine and Arab constructors. The towers show Norman influence, and the cathedral has been remodeled throughout the centuries, incorporating Norman, Gothic, and neoclassical elements. The current dome, however, was built in 1781 by Fernando Fiuga, replacing an earlier one. The Norman Palace was built after the arrival of Robert Hauteville and his son Roger I and Roger II, who ruled the island during the 11th century, and the Palatine Chapel is located inside the palace. Here you can see the eagle, symbol of the Spanish imperial crown. On the left, you can see one of the pillars of Hercules. The other is on the right, probably fallen, in the commemorative arch of the Battle of La Goleta, where Charles V defeated the Muslims of Tunis. This is the Capo Market in the old part of Palermo. It's called Capo and Buciria. Is a neighborhood next to Calza, the Muslim quarter. The variety of provisions is extensive, including vegetable, fruit, fish, meat, and more. The Quattro Canti is dedicated to the four Spanish kings, Charles V, Philip II, Philip III, and Philip IV. It also symbolizes the four seasons. It was built in the Baroque style by Giulio Lasso in 1620. After spending 2 days in Palermo, on the third day we headed to Trapani to see the temple of Segesta. We are inside the temple built by the Limnians in 430 BC. They were descendants of Troy, and the first thing they did when building a city was to build a temple to give thanks to the gods and receive the protection of their ancestors. The temple is unfinished. You can see the ungrooved columns and the rough lintels like simple blocks of stone. Because Segesta was at war with Silinunde for supremacy on the island and later faced a Carthaginian invasion. It was never able to finish its temple or consecrate it. Perhaps for this reason it has remained so well preserved, being one of the best preserved Greek temples and due to its dimensions, one of the largest. You can see in the foundation the stones used to lift the blocks, as the columns were erected by placing blocks one on top of the other. After leaving the temple of Gegesta, I continued my journey towards the city of Agrigento, also known as Agracas, to see the Valley of the Temples there. Before arriving in Agrigento, we stopped at Scala dei Turci, a strange rock formation where we had a snack at a beach bar, and then we arrived at Estancia del Centro, where we stayed for 2 days. It was a very affordable Airbnb, 2 nights for €62. Agrigento Valley of the Temples is located in the Valley of the Temples 2 kilometers from Agrigento. The Greeks established one of their first colonies here, and it is one of the unique areas of the world where 6 temples are found. This is the Temple of Juno. The temples were built in the 6th century BC. They are constructed on a rocky platform on a hill near Agrigento. And the view, as you can see here, is spectacular. You can see the Mediterranean Sea, and there is an area with olive trees more than 500 years old. These 6 temples are the Temple of Juno, which is partially destroyed, the Temple of Concordia, the Temple of Hercules, the Temple of Castor and Pollux, the Temple of Jupiter, and the Temple of Zeus. The best preserved one, which we will see next, is the Temple of the Concordia. This is the Temple of Concord, which, as you can see, is very well preserved. Unlike most of the other temples, which were destroyed by the Carthaginians or by earthquakes. In the background you can see Agrigento, and in the opposite side the Mediterranean Sea. This Temple of Concord is the best preserved because it was likely also used as a Byzantine church at one time, and perhaps for that reason it was not completely destroyed. In 2011, the Polish sculptor Mitorach created this sculpture dedicated to Icarus, and in the background you can see the Temple of Concord. Within the Valley of the Temples complex is a villa, a mansion called Villa Aurea, built by an Englishman, Captain Alexander Hardcastle, who amassed a fortune and dedicated himself at the beginning of the 20th century to excavating all sorts of varied objects in the Valley of the Temples. Main entrance to Villa Aurea, built by Alexander Hardcastle. Here we are at the Temple of Hercules, which is the third temple along the path of the Valley of the Temples in Agrigento. It is only partially preserved, with only these columns still standing. But around the temple there are remains of giant statues that represented some kind of symbolism related to Hercules. Here we stood the temple of Zeus. This temple had colossal dimensions, as you can see in this capital that still remains atop this promontory of ruins and stones. The temple's form, had it been completed, would have been colossal. But this was not to be, as the Carthaginians, upon their arrival in the 4th century BC, prevented its complexion. Along the length of the temple, fragments of sculptures known as telamons can be discerned. These were placed alternatively with the temple's columns. Of the 6 temples in the Valley of the Temples, Castor and Pollux would be the last. The 4 columns were erected after they had been destroyed. Goodbye, Valley of the Temples. On my way now to Noto and then Syracuse. Before reaching Syracuse, we stopped in the city of Noto, an impressive city rebuilt after the 1693 earthquake that completely destroyed it. It is the most exuberant Sicilian jewel in terms of this Baroque style, which many Sicilian cities share, influenced by Spanish Baroque architecture. In Syracuse, we stayed in an Airbnb called Arco Antico near Corso Giacomo Matteotti, a location right at the beginning of the island of Ortigia, which is connected to the city. It cost us €30 per person per night. The island of Ortigia is the heart of Syracuse, with the cathedral and the waterfront area, full of numerous restaurants and shops selling ceramics and souvenirs, all located on narrow streets that wind their way down to the sea. It's very typical to see restaurants tables set up right in the street. All the streets lead down to Plaza Aretusa, from where you can see the entire bay and a natural spring by the sea that creates a freshwater pond resembling an Egyptian landscape with palm trees and papyrus plants. At the end of the island of Ortigia stands this castle called Maniaci, which was built in 1232 by Frederick II. Entrance to the Borgia Palace. In the same square as the Syracuse Cathedral is the Borgia Palace, a building worthy of representing the power of the noblemen who appear in Lampedusa's novel, The Leopard. These were noblemen and princes who had been large landowners on this island of Sicily since time immemorial. We are standing on one side of the Syracuse Cathedral, and as you can see, there are some capitals visible on the wall. And along the length of the wall are the columns of an ancient Greek temple preserved between the structure. The builders of the cathedral kept the columns intact so you can see them and imagine their enormous size. The columns can also be seen from inside the cathedral. These are the columns inside the cathedral of the Greek temple dedicated to Athena, built in the 5th century BC by the tyrant Gelon to commemorate the victory in the Battle of Himera against the Carthaginians. The columns have been preserved, giving an idea of their magnitude both inside and outside the cathedral. In addition to the square in Syracuse, Archimedes also has this commemorative statue of the battle against the Romans, in which, using a system of mirrors that he invented, which we see him holding in his hand in the statue, he managed to burn the ships of the fleet that were besieging Syracuse. Archimedes was a mathematician and engineer. He invented things like the pulley and the lever, and famously said, "Give me a fulcrum," referring to the lever, "and I will move the world." Located in the Neapolis Archaeological Park near Syracuse, the Hero Dionysius cave was named by the painter Caravaggio in 1585. Legend has in that the painter invented the name, claiming that Dionysius artificially constructed the cave to imprison captives and listen to the conversation from a key point in the passageway, thus learning the enemy's plan. The cave is 23 meters high and 65 meters long, and its curved shape, resembling the eardrum, gives it extraordinary acoustic resonance. The sculptures are by the Polish sculptor Igor Mitorach and date from 2011, and the tomb of Archimedes is also located in one of these caves. Heliodoro performed another act of magic, disappearing into the bonfire, and his whereabouts remain unknown. This Greco-Roman theater was built in the 2nd century AD. It is open to the public, although it is quite deteriorated, and is located in Piazza San Francesco on Via Vittorio Emanuele II, next to the Church of San Francesco. It had a capacity for 5,000 spectators. The seating area, cavea, and the orchestra section are in good condition, and the Odeon is also nearby. Built with lava rock from Mount Etna, it was decorated with statues that disappeared in the 11th century. In the 70s, it was used for summer performances, but it was abandoned because its proximity to surrounding buildings make its preservation difficult. This is the Piazza del Duomo in Catania, where you can also find this sculpture of an elephant created by the architect and urban planner Baccarini. The church is built on top of Roman bath. The previous Byzantine church was destroyed in an earthquake, and in the 11th century and in the 12th century it was rebuilt by Roger II. The cathedral suffered extensive damage and was partially rebuilt several times. From the cathedral's facade, where we are standing, you can see the transept from the Norman period, which remained intact. Baccarini built the cathedral in the 18th century, as well as the surroundings square with the town hall, the seminary, and other buildings that make up the piazza. The cathedral is dedicated to Saint Agatha, whose relics are kept there. Inside the Cathedral of Saint Agatha is her chapel containing her relics. She was a saint who was martyred by being burned at the stake by a Roman consul who wanted to force her to renounce Catholicism. The cathedral was built in the 11th century by Roger I on the ruins of an ancient Roman thermal bath. It underwent several reconstructions after the earthquake of 1169 and 1693 and was later rebuilt in the Baroque style. The dome dates from 1802, the bell tower, built in 1387, houses a 7.5-ton bronze bell, the third largest in Italy, after those of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican and the Duomo of Milan. This is Via Etnia, which runs perpendicular to Piazza del Duomo. It's a street designed by the urban architect Baccarini in the 18th century. As you can see, it's very wide. It's now a pedestrian street, and he designed it this way, in part as an escape route in case of another eruption or earthquake from Mount Etna. Since Catania has been destroyed several times by volcanic eruptions, lava has reached Catania even though the volcano is more than 30 kilometers away. Now climbing to the summit to the Sapienza Refuge. Mount Etna is still an active volcano. This very year, on June the 2nd, 2025, it experienced a brief eruption. The eruptions are of the Strombolian type, where pyroclasts explode, launching solid lava rocks, ash and lava through the open craters. The eruptions can originate from the summit or from the flanks, where numerous seemingly dormant craters are located, which can reactivate or new ones can form. Throughout this century, there has been volcanic eruptions almost every year, but the most serious ones occurred in 1693, and earlier in antiquity as recorded by Pliny and other writers. Generally, the eruptions are accompanied by earthquake that can affect the entire island of Sicily. After climbing this hill, the journey was almost over, heading toward Etna. After the excursion to Mount Etna, the trip concluded after passing through Enna, a town located right in the middle of the island, perched on a cliff. A short stop allowed us to appreciate the inland landscape of the beautiful island of Sicily before heading to Palermo, where the journey finally ended. A view from Etna at the end of the town with the Etna volcano at the distance. A panoramic view from the walls of the city behind the cathedral. The Trinacria symbol of Sicily is a Medusa with a woman's head and three legs pointed towards Europe, Greece, and Africa. These also represent the three promontories, one of each vertex of the triangle that forms the island. The ceramic head, according to legend, depicts a Christian woman who fell in love with a Muslim man. When she discovered that he had a wife and children in his Muslim homeland, she beheaded him at night. However, another version of the legend says that it was the woman's brother who beheaded both of them. The ceramic pine cone is a symbol of prosperity, fertility, and abundance. 7 dishes of the Sicilian cuisine. 1. Caponata. Ingredients include eggplant and potato. 2. Fish couscous. 3. Pasta alla norma. 4. Swordfish or emperor fish. 5. Pane gonzato, a type of flat bread filled with various ingredients such as cheese, tomato, salad, etc. 6. Arancini, round coquette filled with rice and various ingredients. 7. Cannoli, pastry filled with sweet cream, custard, and chocolate. Movie set in Sicily. The Leopard, 1963. Luchino Visconti, Claudia Cardinale, and Alain Delon. The Postino, 1994. Based on a novel by Pablo Neruda, directed by Michael Radford. Adventure, 1960. Directed by Michelangelo Antonioni with Monica Vitti. The Godfather, 1972, 74, and 90. Trilogy director Francis Ford Coppola with Marlon Brando. Malena, 2000, Giuseppe Tornatore, Monica Bellucci. Stromboli, 1950, director Rossellini, Ingrid Bergman. Cinema Paradiso, 1988, director Giuseppe Tornatore. Most books about the history of Sicily are in English, considering that the Crown of Aragon and the Spanish Empire ruled the island for 400 years. It's strange not to find many history books about the Spanish rule there. However, books like those by Sandra Benjamin, John Julius Norwich, and Lawrence Durrell are, in my opinion, very pro-British, even though England only gained a foothold on the island through the Treaty of Utrecht and did nothing positive, instead installing Amadeo of Savoy as king to weaken the viceroyalty of Sicily. Nor do these English history books mention Spain's significant achievement, such as stopping the Ottoman invasion or introducing the Spanish Baroque style that beautifies so many Sicilian cities.